Good afternoon. My name is Amy Corbin, and I am a staff attorney at the Texas Children's Commission. I would like to thank you and welcome you all today for attending the webinar entitled Supporting School-Age Children in Care. This presentation is from Kathy Thurman, the DFPS Ed Specialist from Region 4, and Jennifer Heimbach, the Ed Specialist from Region 6. A copy of today's PowerPoint presentation will be made available along with a recording of this presentation on the Children's Commission's on-demand training and MCLE webpage. For those of you who are watching live, the Q&A feature is available for this webinar, and questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation, where we will also be joined by the State Office Ed Specialist Manager, Felicia Penn. Additionally, the MCLE course number will be provided at the end of the presentation. If you're watching the webinar on replay, you can email the cctraining@txcourts.gov for the MCLE self-reporting information. It is now my great pleasure to turn over to our co-presenters, Kathy Thurman and Jennifer Heimbach.
Thank you so much, Amy. We're happy to be here and happy to present to let you know what education specialists actually do and what we can do to help the courts. Next. So we do a lot of advocating for our kiddos, for their educational needs. We track down academic records. We do tracking of the education portfolios. Education portfolios are a huge piece for the kiddos. It carries their academic information. So when they go to placement, they have those and take them with them to each placement. And once they leave care, whether they age out, whether they're adopted, whether their case is closed with a relative or foster parent, that education portfolio stays with them for their life. So it's great information for them to keep. We also track psychiatric admissions. We participate in ARD meetings with our kids, and we also create better outcomes for the youth in foster care by just providing resources and just kind of helping out where needed if they're having a little bit of issues in school. We provide trainings and consortiums, and we also help to address the 2085E concerns. Now, the 2085E is your education decision maker, and so that lets the school know who is the person that is in charge of enrolling the child, making some educational decisions for the child. It also alerts the school that this child is in foster care and they are entitled to free nutrition benefits, as well as just letting them know how to code the child as well, and that they're entitled for immediate enrollment. We also provide information, referral services regarding education-related resources. We work very, very closely with DFPS staff to ensure that children in conservatorship do receive the appropriate education services. We kind of guide them a bit to know that if a child is having some struggles, what they can do with the school, how they can get the child evaluated, things like that. We also act as a liaison to TEA, to the independent school districts in our area, and also any other program specialists within DFPS. Next, please. So we do a lot of presentations and trainings, and as you'll see here, I don't want to read each one to you, but we talk to attorneys and judges. We talk to units in our own CPS system, conservatorship, investigation, family-based safety services. We do surrogate parent trainings, and we do a lot of talks with the local ISDs, do presentations with them, with counselors, with principals, assistant principals, things of that matter, so that they are kind of informed on foster care. A lot of people really aren't aware of all of the rules and the laws that go along with children in foster care. So we try to help them along with that so that they know where our children stand and the benefits that they have for being in foster care. Next, please. Consultations we do with caseworkers, with CASA, therapists, caregivers, kinship, with schools, attorneys, judges, and any other stakeholder that is involved in the child's life. Next, please. We do collaborations with PAL, with universities. We attend conferences so that we can learn more information to provide better resources for our families and for our children. We collaborate with well-being specialists. We collaborate with FGDM, that's family group decision making, and we attend those meetings as well. And also we collaborate with the court system. Next. So what is cross-system collaboration about? Fostering Connections and ESSA both ask the welfare and educational agencies to collaborate so that we can help the outcome, or to help the educational outcome of our children that are in foster care. And so you ask, how do we do that? First of all, you can find out who your education specialist is. We are, there are 12 of us. We are in different regions throughout the state of Texas. And if you find out who we are, we can help you along, because sometimes it's hard to know who the caseworker is, who is the CASA on the case, things like that. We can at least get you in touch with who that caseworker is today, because we all know that caseworkers do tend to change at times. But we're a good point of contact just to help you with that. And you can also attend ESC trainings, consortiums. You can sign up for the TEA webinars that provide updates on laws, policy, things of that matter. And that's a really, really great resource as well. Also, we utilize the Foster Care and Student Success Guide. That success guide is wonderful. It's probably around 177 pages or so. It's a great guide. I use it every single day, and it helps to point out things for the foster care liaisons and other people involved in the educational support of the children in foster care. It's just a great, great guide. So I recommend that you look that up, or hopefully we can get that to you. Next. Now, the points of contact. So federal law requires that the LEAs designate a point of contact to coordinate local child welfare agency concerns like immediate enrollment, best interest determination, transportation, collaboration, and other ESSA requirements that support that school stability for kids in foster care. Also, state law states that each school district and open enrollment charter school appoints one employee to kind of be that liaison between the LEAs, between CPS and the school district themselves. That person is called the foster care liaison. And then, of course, you have our DFPS Education Specialist in state office who serves as the state point of contact. And we have the pleasure of having her on today. She's Miss Felicia Penn. And DFPS Regional Education Specialists, such as myself, I happen to cover Region 6B, which is the 12 counties surrounding Harris County. I serve as that point of contact. I advocate for our kiddos in our region. I speak with the liaisons, and I'm also an expert on educational resources between the local school and CPS staff in providing the best educational outcomes for our kiddos. And I will say that if a child is legally from, say, 6B, I would be that point of contact and their education specialist. But if child happens to be placed in Region 6B, but they are, say, from Region 5, then the Region 5 specialist, you kind of stay with your kiddo, because we kind of get to know them after a while, and we know their circumstances and things. And so it's great that they have us to follow them along throughout their time in foster care. Next. As you'll see here, the education specialists are listed by region, and there are 12 of us there. And you can look this up. You can Google it, look it up on the DFPS website. And if you click on a link, you can email us, or you can also give us a call. We're always happy to answer. Next, please. So education stability in ESSA. ESSA is the Every Student Succeeds Act, and that is an act that went into effect in 2015 to help the education outcome of children in foster care, because our kiddos tend to move so much, and we really wanted and needed something in place so that our kids just didn't have to get moved continuously. Imagine a child, 11th grade. They have gone their whole lives to one particular school, and then something happens in their family and they have to be removed, and they end up maybe moving to the next school district, Well, that is really horrible for the child. Not only are they removed from their home, but they're losing all their friends and everything they've ever known, their teachers and coaches and things like that. So ESSA was implemented so that that child would be able to remain in what is called the school of origin, so that they could finish up their education, go through and graduate from that school that you've been with all this time. And also, a school of origin kind of follows you as well. For instance, if it's just not in the child's best interest to stay in that school, maybe they're in kindergarten and they have moved with an aunt that's 2 hours away. Probably not the best idea for a child in kindergarten to go 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening back and forth to school. But if that child ends up staying with aunt for a couple of years, and then that school is doing wonders for that child in the school, and the child's doing really, really well, then that school that the child is attending is now considered the school of origin, because that school of origin will follow them. And if that child gets moved again, if we determine it's in the best interest for that child to stay, by federal and state law, that child is allowed to stay in that school. Okay, so who decides education best interest? It's a collaboration. We really, really do like to talk about things. There have been certain situations where we were thinking that, yeah, it's probably in the child's best interest, even if it's a 45-minute to an hour drive. But the school of origin only lasts until the highest level of highest grade level of that school. So for instance, if a child is in middle school, then they could do 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. But then for 9th grade, they really do have to go back to their the school that they're zoned to. But we decided last year, this is for instance, child was going into 8th grade. It was going to be a really far drive. Determined that it was not in the child's best interest to stay in that school of origin, because when you're in 8th grade, you kind of start making those good correlations with friends, those good connections. And also, if you want to play a sport or something like that, it may just be better to go in 8th grade so that those coaches start to get to know you. So whenever you are moving up, you're known and you can try out and hopefully make that team, and you've already got those connections. So that was just a for instance on, when it is maybe in best interest and maybe not. Streamline transitions, we really just want to ensure that there's seamless transitions within the school. There are the designated points of contact that I mentioned earlier. Transportation is a big thing. The schools will work together to transport these children back and forth to their school of origins. There's also dispute resolution. And that if there's something that happens, maybe for instance, if we want a child to remain in their school of origin and the school district that the child was in just doesn't think it's in the child's best interest, but we as the department continue to believe that it is, we can take it to the next step and ask for someone to step in to help us with kind of resolving this. But we do try to work it out between ourselves, and generally it is worked out between the schools and CPS. And then data collection and reporting. ESSA requires disaggregated data on students in foster care, including academic achievement, dropout, and graduation information. Next, please. Okay, and I will hand it over to Kathy.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for having us today. I'm going to cover some issues that we face in special education for my part. So to begin, what is child find? Schools must identify, locate, and evaluate all students in need of special education services, regardless of the severity of the disability. Federal requirement under IDEA, all children ages birth to 21 in need of special education services are identified, located, and evaluated. So the evaluation provides assistance in determining whether the student has a disability, whether they need specifically designed instruction, and the need for evidence-based interventions and how to monitor the student's progress. So school may not take a passive approach. They must seek out IDEA eligible students. How is this done? TEA, child find, and evaluation. Next, please. So what is the process from child find to individually education program? So the child first must be identified as having a need. Prior written notices given and parental consent must be obtained. It can go no further unless you have the parental permission that has to be signed. Then the child is evaluated. We have an ARD meeting. Eligibility is determined. And if that child is eligible for special education service, then an IEP is written and put into place. And we'll talk more about this process in a few slides later. Next, please. So the two requirements that qualify a student for an IEP, they qualify for special education services under one or more of the disability categories outlined in IDEA. The law lists specific challenges like learning disabilities, ADHD, autism, and others. The disability must affect the child's educational performance and or ability to learn and benefit from the general education curriculum. The child must need specialized instruction to make progress in school. So in order for a child to qualify for special education, both of these requirements must be met, not just the disability category. Next, please. So these are our 13 disability categories. Most of them are self-explanatory, but I do want to really touch on a few of these. Specific learning disability is the most common under our children in special education. About 30 to 35% of our children in that are receiving special education qualify under specific learning disability. One of the main disabilities that fall under specific learning disability is dyslexia. Dyslexia used to be only a 504 to be serviced for that. Now it can qualify under the specific learning disability. Math, maybe the child has trouble with math computation. So that might be listed as their specific learning disability. Reading comprehension could be listed under the specific disability as well. Other health impairment. Other health impairment has to have a form that's filled out by a physician with the physician's signature. The most common disabilities that fall under other health impairment is ADHD. We have many students qualifying under that, but the other health impairment could also be sickle cell anemia, Tourette syndrome, epilepsy. Those could fall also under other health impairment. And then I wanted to touch on that non-categorical early childhood. So our children that are 3 to 5 years old, it's very hard to diagnose a disability for children that are that young. So for disabilities such as intellectual disability, emotional disturbance, specific learning disability, autism, those would fall under non-categorical early childhood. So we're not really placing a diagnosis on a child. Before their 6th birthday, they are reevaluated and they may qualify under one of those categories, but not from 3 to 5 year olds. They also, they can qualify under any of the other disabilities that are listed: deaf, hard of hearing, speech impairment, orthopedic impairment, but we do not label the 3 to 5 year olds with intellectual disability, emotional disturbance, autism, and specific learning disability. Next, please. So accommodations versus modifications. So accommodations does not change the curriculum that the student is expected to learn. It just changes the way they're going to learn that curriculum. The accommodations intend to reduce or eliminate the effects of the student's disability on academic tasks, but they do not lower the expectations. So maybe under an accommodation, they, instead of 20 spelling words for the week, child may receive 10. So they're still learning the sounds that everyone else is learning and the spelling of those words, just reduced assignments. They may have small group instruction, text to speech, speech to text, and the questions could be read aloud to them, but that doesn't change the curriculum that they're actually learning. Modifications can change the actual curriculum. The modifications change what the student is expected to master, and decision to modify should be data-driven and individualized for the student. And that's where we come under the individual education program that's developed in the ARD meeting for each student. Next, please. So I know these are hard to see, the difference between special education and 504 accommodations, and what is the actual difference between these. So section 4 was the 504 Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and special education was the Individuals with Disability Education Act that started in 1975 but was amended in 2004. So under 504, it's hard to see the screen. It's hard for me to see too, so I've kind of made notes for myself on this. The students under 504, they must have a disability that adversely affects the way that they learn in the classroom. Under special education, the individual, most of them qualify under the 13 categories that we discussed earlier, and they must adversely affect the way this child is able to learn in the general classroom. For the 504, the parents do have to sign permission for that child to be evaluated, but the parent doesn't necessarily have to attend that 504 meeting. Under 504, there is nothing by law that states how often that a meeting must take place. In special education, our ARD meetings have to take place every year, and we can't ask for meetings in between that time as well. And the parents do have to be part of that IEP meeting, and they have, which is also part of the ARD committee. So once we get 504 established for a student, again, there is nothing in writing that says that they have to have a meeting annually, although in best practice would be to have that meeting, and we can certainly ask for that meeting to take place every year to make sure that that child's education needs are being met. So under 504, many of our caseworkers, they use a redacted psychological that they provide to the school, because there's many disabilities that are listing a lot of times that the school would accept. Again, you have to follow the specific guidelines with special education under the 13 disabilities that are listed. We often ask for 504 for a child if we're waiting for an evaluation to take place. And we know that that process does take quite a while. So many times we ask for 504 accommodations in the meantime, so that we're not leaving that child behind. And we don't want them to get further behind than they already are. Next, please. So the actual education process. So step 1, a parent, teacher, or other professional may request a student be tested. So this can be, again, like they said, a parent, teacher, or other professional. It could be the caseworker. It could be CASA. Anyone that knows that child, they can request an evaluation may take place for this child. the request must be made in writing, not by word of mouth, but everything involving special education revolves around a timeline, and we need to have the exact timestamp, so to say. So if we send an email, we always have record of that email, the date it was sent, the time that it was sent, to follow with what we call the 15, 45, 30 days that fall within the special education. So after that referral has been made, the school has 15 days to provide written notice if they're going to be evaluating. If they're not going to be evaluating, they have 15 days to provide a notice of action refused or prior written notice of refusal. Some of the reasons that the schools might not be evaluating, maybe this child has not been in school, they haven't been exposed to the classroom, exposed to the material that the other children are learning. And so the school would like to see more of that child in the classroom, spend a little bit more time with them, because they want to determine, is a child behind because of lack of exposure, or is that child behind because they actually have some type of disability. Sometimes they will put in place what's called RTI, response to intervention. So they'll have a plan for, they have phase 1. They'll put some things in place that they feel like will help this child. If that is not being successful, then they'll go to phase 2, and then they'll go to 3. So during that time, they may have already put 504 services in place for this child. If none of that is working for that child, then the school will move forward with the evaluation. So that may be some of the reasons that they give a notice of action refused. So if prior written notice is given, then the parents must sign that consent form in order for the evaluation process to proceed. That's what I always tell my parents, that that's like, so to speak, that's when the clock starts ticking on getting this going. So the next step would be the full and individual evaluation. So this may include psychologicals, classroom observation data that has been collected by the teachers, and also input from the teachers on what they are seeing with this child in the classroom. So that 45-day school days to complete that individual evaluation. So as we know, 45 school days, that's a long time. And that's one of the reasons that we may ask for 504 services to be put in place while we're waiting for that evaluation to take place. Next, please. Step 4, the ARD meeting. After the evaluation is completed, the ARD meeting must be held within 30 calendar days after the initial evaluation is completed. So during this ARD meeting, they will go over all of the data that has been collected, and they will make a decision on the eligibility of that child, whether or not they meet the eligibility. The notice of the meeting has to be provided at least 5 days in advance, but the parents can agree to a shorter time period. They can waive that 5 days. So once we have the ARD meeting and it is determined that that student meets the eligibility, then the IEP is going to be developed. So this is the written plan agreement between the school and the parents that will be developed, and it's reviewed at least annually. And you can always ask for an ARD meeting in between. If you don't feel that child's needs are being met, then you can ask for another meeting to be held at any time. So the IEP is going to consist of many things. Number one, we have our diagnosis, the reason that they qualify, but it also has written goals that the student will master. It may say 70% of the time, or it may say 5 out of 7 tries. And so the parents get that information. They receive all of those reports that they need to review and determine if they feel like that their child is actually making progress, or if they feel like that IEP needs to be changed and different goals need to be added to it. We could also have in the IEP, we could have a behavior intervention plan if we feel like that behavior is inhibiting that child's ability to learn in the classroom. Next, please. I believe that is my last one. Yes.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
Jennifer's going to step in.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so good information for the courts. Immediate enrollment for all kids that are age 3 to 21 that are in DFPS custody. They should be enrolled in a public school immediately. CPS policy is that child, once placed, should be enrolled within 2 days if they have had to change schools. And state and federal law is within 3 days. So if you have heard of a worker that they're saying that the school is giving them a hard time about enrolling, it's more likely because their registrar is not informed of the foster care laws. Once they're told, and generally what happens is the caseworker will reach out to us. I'll reach out to that foster care liaison and they'll say, I know you're following all of the laws that we're supposed to follow as far as all of the paperwork needed to enroll a child in school, but children in CPS custody do not need their required paperwork. What they need at the time of enrollment is basically that 2085E, which is the education decision maker, and then the 2085, which is the placement authorization form. Those two forms together let the school know everything that they need to know to enroll that child. And then with the caseworker has 30 days, or the caregiver, both technically have 30 days to get the rest of the information to the school. Even if the child is not up to date on immunizations and things, we still have time to allow that child to get the shots and get caught up on that. Now, the next thing is court order GEDs. If there is a child that, is 17 and a half, and we know that they've not been attending school, and we are concerned about, what's going to happen to them next, please reach out to your education specialist. Now, the caseworker knows that this is considered an exception to standard schooling if they're going to not go to regular public school and if they would like a GED. But we like to look through our records, and we like to look, for instance, at their STAR tests. If I look at STAR tests and see that this child has never passed a STAR test, they've not been to school since maybe, the first week of 9th grade, they've not covered quite enough information. I so apologize. They do not cover quite enough information in order to allow them to complete that. I'm sorry, to pass their GED test. So please consult with us. Also, absences. A school district shall excuse a student from attending school, including travel, if the student in conservatorship of DFPS participating as determined and documented by DFPS is an activity ordered by the court or required under a service plan. So say, for instance, that a child is to have court-ordered therapy that is maybe on the family plan of service, and that is to happen weekly with the parents. Okay, that's difficult for us to be okay with, especially if it's, the same day every week. Like if it's Tuesday at 10 a.m. during geometry and this kiddo is having a really hard time in geometry, we don't love that. And we'd hope that those dates and times can be changed around a little bit. But if it has to happen, then we do have an excused absence note that can be given to the school, and the school is to act like the child did not miss school at all, and they're to be given extra time to make up that work. We also have the education portfolios. These education portfolios should not be empty. I have seen where we've had a kiddo in care for several years, and the caregiver's given a green binder with tabs in it. That's really not the purpose of it, to physically just have a green portfolio. We need it filled up with information. This is a piece of the child's history. When I talk to caseworkers and when I talk to RTCs and caregivers, I ask them also not just to put the child's IEPs in there, not just the child's report cards. If that child earns a certificate, they've done something great in school, put that in there. There's a slot for that in there. Make sure it gets in there. Also, there's an area for pictures. I know that it's very expensive to get pictures done at school. It really is. But if the child gets a picture made that first day of school, that caregiver can run over to CVS, get that picture made for 50 cents, put it in that slot that says school pictures. Because, when this child's older, like I mentioned before, this child gets to take this with them, placement to placement, or once they age out of care or just gone from the system completely, they get to keep this. And one day they might have children who want to look back at their pictures and say, gosh, mom, I know my own kids say, mom, your hair was crazy back then. And, things like that. So we want our kids to be able to have that and not just have this blank time frame in their lives when we don't know, they don't know what they look like. They don't remember what was going on placement to placement. So those binders are important. Also, if a school does require a verification of a child that's entitled for pre-K, please email this mailbox, and you can email with the child's name and the child's date of birth. And our state office education specialist is excellent at getting those to you very quickly. She sometimes does it within a day, depending on different things, sometimes 24 hours or so, but she's great at getting those out to you quickly so that the kids so the school has that verification so they know that the child is eligible. Next, please. Now, how can the courts help us? One of our biggest struggles is attendance. I'm sure that you are all aware of so many of the kids, just once they get to a certain age, they decide either they're doing well in school and they're thriving, or they decide they don't want to go. And so it's really, really difficult. We really like everyone to encourage attendance in school. Now, we have those pre-K verification letters that I just spoke about. All state of Texas requires that all kids 6 to 18 attend school. And once they're enrolled, a child younger than 6 shall continue to attend school. Students are to be enrolled into a public school within the 3 days of placement per law, and they must stay in school at least that 90% of time without all of those absences. Schools must be provided documentation to excuse absences due to medical, legal, or DFPS related incidents. And again, please encourage regular attendance. I know it's hard and sometimes we just can't force a child to go, but maybe if the judge talks to them, the attorneys talk to them about, this is the one thing that they can get and keep with them that CPS has given them, because once they complete their K through 12 education, they get tuition vouchers where they can go to school free, and they can not just get their bachelor's or master's, they can go all the way and get their PhD for free. So please, please help us to encourage these kiddos. Next.
All right. Thank you so much, Jennifer and Kathy. We now want to open up for questions. We do have about 20 minutes left. And so I will invite Jennifer, Kathy, and Felicia to come on. We know that our audience probably has a lot of specific questions, and so we did reserve a good amount of time. So I am going to start with one that has been dropped in the Q&A, which is foster parents often report that the youth will arrive to their home without an education portfolio. What can they do about this when the caseworker is not responsive to their concerns? How can they attempt to get this portfolio?
You want me to answer that since I talked about portfolios, I guess? They can definitely reach out to their education specialist. I have several RTCs and caregivers as well that have called me to tell me, I've got an appointment next week to go to deliver a few portfolios, but I will reach out. I'll look up to see who that caseworker is. And again, because they may be calling that caseworker, but the caseworker could have changed. The caseworker could no longer be with the state, something like that. So if they contact us, we are able to track that down, find out where their portfolio is. Sometimes they do forget it because sometimes placement changes could occur, middle of the night. Something happens, a child goes to a psychiatric hospital or something along those lines. And then the caregiver says, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And then they just have to come pick up the child. So they may have to go back to that caregiver to get that portfolio, and they may have to mail it to them or something like that. But please call us and we will try to track that down for you.
Great, thank you. Along those lines, Should the legal region where the child is legally their court case, or is it the region where the child attends school? Who should someone contact when they have a youth that they're wanting to reach out to as far as who the appropriate ed specialist is?
The appropriate ed specialist is the one to whom their legal region is, but you may not know who that is in this area. And if you don't, it is completely fine to contact any one of us, and we will make sure that we get you to the correct ed specialist to loop them in and to help them to get that information.
Great, thank you. Okay, we've got a couple questions coming in the chat now. This one involves a child who may be involved in the juvenile justice system. Do you have any recommendations or thoughts on providing education to a child that is jailed as an adult because they're 17, but they are still in school aged?
Usually once that happens, we're not so much involved. They kind of cut us out and they go to the jail itself in order to provide those services. So that we're more than welcome to, we're happy to collaborate with them, answer any questions, attend any services that we can if allowed. But usually they cut us out at that point. So there's not a whole lot we can do besides working with the attorneys to advocate for them to have some sort of school services while they are housed there.
But you would like them to still reach out to their ed specialist to become involved?
To see if sometimes they do reach out to us and we're involved and we know that this is happening and we can give our input, we can share records, but many times they do not. So if the attorney knows that this is happening, that's a need, then together, absolutely, we can advocate for them to have those services.
Great, thank you. Along those same lines, when you are contacted by an attorney or other concerned professional, what information do you need in order to kind of start the looking into the youth, their school, when they're emailing you or leaving you a voicemail? What information do you want them to go ahead and have ready on hand?
Child's name and date of birth is really all we need.
Pretty simple. Okay, good. All right. The next question is about the school's transportation, some issues relating to transportation. So is there someone who might be able to help explain a school's transportation obligation regarding special needs child who is in foster care?
Well, transportation can actually be written into the student's IEP. And we do have special transportation that would be a smaller bus size for children that are in need of that. Monitors on the bus to make sure that everything is okay with that child. Sometimes it can be arranged to have an early drop-off time or a late drop-off time, even at school, so that they might avoid certain situations. Or even end their school day a little bit early so that they can get on their bus to go home. Again, that might be for discipline purposes or something like that if we're having trouble with them.
Along those same lines of special education, you mentioned how a parent, teacher, or other professional can kind of request that referral. If a judge or an attorney has a school-age child in front of them and that hasn't started, what steps should they take to see that referral kind of get started?
Well, they can contact any of the education specialists. If they know the child well, they can also make that referral for, I mean, as long as you know the child, you know that child has needs and you feel like that they do have a disability. But they can also reach out to the education specialists. I do a lot of referrals for the caseworkers that contact me. CASA can do the referrals as well. So, I would contact the education specialists if they're unsure of what they needed to do. And the education specialist can take care of many of those problems for them.
Great, thank you. Another question has to deal with the youth who are in child without placement. Is there a special way in which those youth and their attending school is handled? The question kind of remarks that many attorneys are seeing youth who are in child without placement, child watch. They're not enrolled in school at all. So what steps can they do? Kind of what's being done about these children who are in child watch?
I'll answer that. We have a lot of child watch in my area. I have something written out that I generally send out to my caseworkers to kind of help them and guide them along with getting the kids enrolled in school. They are to be enrolled in school at the hotels that they are living at, whatever that zoned area is, unless now they stay in their school of origin. And if it's in their best interest, then we can help them to get that ESSA request over to the foster care liaison of the school that they were attending prior. But if it's in their best interest to start a new school, maybe they were having a lot of fights, maybe, just for many, many different reasons, it's just not in their best interest to stay at that other school. They should immediately, within the 2 to 3 days time frame, get enrolled in school. They need to that caseworker or the caregiver, well, obviously in the place of child watch is going to be the caseworker. Caseworker needs to fill everything out online and call the school, get that appointment so that the child can be enrolled. And that child hopefully will have their education portfolio that will have their IEP in it if they're in special education, or report cards from before, so that the school can quickly get the child's schedule basically made so that the child can start attending same day, next day.
And Amy,
Great.
let me add, I'm sorry.
Please do. No, go ahead.
I see the caseworkers doing this. See the ed specialists going over and beyond to get the children enrolled in school. And we do all of this, we jump through all the hoops, and then we can't get them to leave the CWAP location to attend. So if they're not going to show up for the first day after so long, the school's going to withdraw them. So we're having that problem too. So this is where, when Jennifer discussed how the courts and we all can help each other, if we can strongly encourage them to attend the best we can, that helps. What we find also is we can't even get the child to show up the first day to do the enrollment. And the school only requires that we have the 2085s and that child in order to do an enrollment, but we can't even get them to do that part. So therefore, they're not enrolled. So we're doing the best we can on our side, but we kind of need everybody's hand on this one.
Great. Thank you, Felicia. What would you say to kind of the legal audience, the attorneys, the judges who are watching, to kind of help encourage those youth to attend school? Again, these are probably some of our most vulnerable students who are in that CWAP situation. And you mentioned, again, getting them to just go to school. How would you encourage them to kind of help encourage that youth?
Accountability is one. We find that sometimes, even if we get, let's say they're in a placement, caregivers get tired of being called for behaviors or suspensions. So they just don't even send them to school. They wake up and they're having a bad day, they don't send them. I know the attorneys will have a case long-term, whereas we're in and out. We put out a fire, then we're on to the next. If you have that relationship with that youth, if you can have the conversations to find out why they're not wanting to go to school. Is it because they're behind? Is it because of the clothes that they're wearing or the hairstyles that they have? Sometimes it's those simple things, but it means the world to them. So if it's something like that we can fix and get them encouraged enough to go to school, we'll do our part. But we don't always have that relationship, that ongoing relationship, that trust relationship that they need to open up. So if you know something that's happening that caseworker, because they change so often, doesn't have privy to, please share it with us so that we can get in and fix it. If it's a situation of being bullied, a teacher that they just have, they're not clicking well, personalities aren't matching, we can push and advocate for those things to be changed too. But we have to know. And they're not going to talk to us because like I said, we're in and out. We don't have those relationships that their attorney may have with them, or the judge that they go before. They think that world of their judges, the judge changes things in the world. So they may open up to you or they may not do it for us. So if you can share those little bits, we'd appreciate that.
Great. Thank you, Felicia. Along those same lines, would the ed specialist prefer to be notified of a small issue before it, as it's just kind of creating as an, kind of a problem, or will you prefer kind of on the back end, let the, caseworker in school try to work it out first, and then you be brought in at the end? At what point in education issue would you kind of prefer to get involved?
I can answer that one. I like to be in from the beginning. Oftentimes, let's say just for enrollment, they're supposed to be enrolled within 3 days, and then we get notification 2 weeks later saying the school's not enrolling them because they don't have all the paperwork. So that child's missed 2 weeks of school. So if there's an issue, I like to be notified up front, and maybe we can put out the fire before it even starts at that point. I know sometimes that's impossible, but that's the best case scenario.
And that's our dispute resolution process, to contact the ed specialist right away on any and everything. We would so rather have a million little bitty fires we can put out versus something creating a bonfire, and we can't stomp that one out quite simply. So, and they know to contact ed specialists right away. They get involved. If it can't be handled on that level, then it comes to myself at state office, and then with Dr. Watson at TEA. So that's our dispute resolution process. So yes, contact ed specialists with the little things because they can knock those out really quickly.
Does someone want to talk about that relationship with TEA? This is kind of the DFPS part. You are our ed specialist. Can you talk about the relationship you have with the school districts? Is that something you're comfortable, when you have an issue, when you reach out to them? What does that relationship look like? Just so that our audience kind of gets a picture of what's going on behind the scenes when you're contacted.
I would love to answer that one. I have several foster care liaisons that they literally call me their BFF because they call me so much and they're like, it's me again today. I'm so sorry. I'm like, no. I love it when you call because I can help and I can step in before the bonfire happens, as Felicia mentioned before. So we generally have a very good relationship. If you're having an issue with the school district in particular, we have at least had some sort of contact with them because annually we send out a letter telling them who we are, telling them that we are their point of contact and to please reach out to us. And so I have had many reach out. So if you have an issue, contact us because chances are we know them and they help us and we help them. And so it's a pretty quick process.
Great. Something that Kathy mentioned was kind of maybe a delay in a youth starting school. And we often hear kind of in the legal community about records transfer. That's kind of a little bit of a barrier in a youth. Would one of you feel comfortable talking about that records transfer process and what you can kind of do on the side of DFPS when that's not occurring timely?
I would think that the ed specialist would step in and show them how that school districts can request the records transfer a lot quicker than we absolutely ever could with just using the TREC system. Because in a matter of days, they would get records from one school to the other school. Whereas if it's us, we've got to physically go to the school and get all, collect all those records and so forth. If you're not getting the records, then yes, we absolutely can step in and contact the school and request them ourselves, but we're going to ask that they use the TREC system as well. So we kind of all revolve around the same system, unless I'm missing something, Jennifer or Kathy, that may have changed or.
Well, I know that TEA requires that the schools send it within 10 days, but they asked for foster students that they please, 10 days is like the longest stretch. Please do it much sooner, especially for the kiddos in foster care.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question has come in and it relates to juvenile detention centers. So the questions are, what are the obligations of a juvenile detention center when it comes to the IDEA and 504? Is there a kind of foster care liaison at detention center? If someone can speak a little bit about, that process.
I don't believe there's a liaison at the detention centers, but they do still have to follow. If the child has 504 plan, if they have an IEP, they do still have to follow that. And I know many of them have like a hired teacher there to teach the youth while they're in the detention center as well.
And
I
would
know.
the process, oops, I'm sorry, would that process be the same requesting, say they're not on the 504, say they haven't been evaluated, is that process the same for anyone to request that?
At the detention center, I'm not sure I know have the exact answer to that. Felicia?
The process is the same. I mean, that's federal law, but it's still the same. I don't know if they have a foster care liaison that we have with every school district or if that's their title, but there is someone that's in charge of the education department within the detention center that takes over and reads all the ARDs and tries to implement whatever they can within that setting. Like I said, sometimes they call us and we're invited to those ARDs, but usually they kind of take over and they handle it from there on, but they are still required to follow the same guidelines as a district would.
I can also add, if you don't mind, that I know that some of the juvenile detention centers in my area, they have a particular school district like that they might reside within, and that school district kind of oversees the schooling in that juvenile detention center. And so I have reached out to my foster care liaison for that school, you know, to try to help me get records and different things like that, just to make sure that educationally everything is going well for that child. I don't know that that's true for all areas, but there are definitely some like that.
And would foster care liaisons would the ed specialists, would y'all still be an ad litem or another child welfare professional's kind of first call if there are questions about a youth in a detention center and their educational needs?
As long as they're still under our jurisdiction and custody, yes, absolutely.
Great, thank you, Felicia. I do have a couple more questions. We have about 3 minutes left. One is, as we know, the state is kind of transferring to SSCC. And so, Felicia, I don't know if you want to talk about the relationship and training that you have with some of these new workers and what that essentially is looking at as it's rolling out across the state.
It's a big change for us, and we're all adjusting. Ed specialists are doing their best to meet with those agencies and still provide training, show them how to do things in the education world. We are still vital parts of education, and we're their go-to person until something changes. Right now, that is how it is. And so they are to contact the ed specialists. And anytime they have new employees, ed specialists are to go out and do their trainings, help them set up any school education systems that they may want to put into place. They still are a very active part. So right now, that's how things are moving, and they are doing the trainings. Not all the ed specialists, because not all the states have this in place just yet. Not all cities and regions have this in place just yet. But the ones who do, that is what they're doing. And Jennifer had a really active one, and so she helped transition them and get them set up for a school-bound setting that they had, or like a charter school. And so they are including them. So that part, we're still functioning the same.
Great. Well, one last comment that we're able to get to, and unfortunately we're out of time to get to the rest of the question, is that there are some kudos. Someone said that they've worked with some amazing DFPS specialists over the years, and they highly encourage attorneys to reach out to you guys for assistance and guidance, that they just wanted to praise you all for being super helpful. So I want to thank everyone for your time today. On behalf of the Children's Commission, I want to thank our speakers, Kathy, Jennifer Heimbach, Felicia Penn, for that very informative presentation. I also want to give a special thank you to the Children's Commission's program specialist, Chelsea Martinez. She helped bring this together, and we hope you found this as informative as we were hoping it would be. Thank you for watching today's presentation. We hope that you will join us for our next webinar on October 8th, focused on domestic violence in child welfare cases. Additional information is available on the Children's Commission On Demand Training and MCLE webpage. The State Bar has approved this course for a 1-hour MCLE credit. Individuals who are watching this replay may contact the CC training at txcourts.gov for MCLE reporting information. You will receive a follow-up email within the next 24 hours with this MCLE information. Once again, thank you for joining us for today's presentation.